Thanks for joining us and welcome to another edition of the Catholic View for Women, our show for women and men, anyone who wants to watch actually, with news and views for women and men from a truly Catholic perspective. I'm Teresa Tomeo and I also host the morning radio show here at EWTN Global Catholic Radio, The Catholic Connection. And with me as my co-host, of course, as always, the lovely, effervescent Astrid Bennett Gutierrez from Hispanics for Life and Los Angeles Pregnancy Services, and Janet Marana from Priest for Life, Silent No More. And you can also see her right here on EWTN. Many of you know her well from Defending Life, where she's also a co-host. So this program is an exciting one because this is about each of us making a difference. We've entitled this program, The Power of One. And I know you ladies deal with the public a lot, as do I, and I hear from so many people who say, oh, I'm just this or I'm just that. I don't have a theology degree. Gosh, I could never witness. I could never make a difference. But that really is such a wrong approach. You're setting yourself up for a disappointment, and you're also really insulting God in some ways. Because all of us are born and given the gift of evangelization, and we're all called to evangelize by virtue of our baptism.
Absolutely. You know, if you were to ask me, would I be doing the things I'm doing now 10 years ago, I would tell you, crazy. I wasn't like thinking in these terms, but then God opens the doors and you have to walk through them. You know, He's giving that opportunity, so you're being called to do it, you know?
Yes.
And you don't have to wait for, you know, someone to say, okay, do it. You just have to, you know, get that an answer to God's call and opportunity.
And in everyday life, too, I get to see women that are in crisis pregnancies, and these women are faced with this decision, and the culture saying, you know, don't have this baby, you know, and here these women are, many are docile to the voice of God, against adversity, choosing life, like our Blessed Mother, saying yes to life. So we see women that have everything against them, choosing God, choosing life. So all of us have opportunities to really make a huge consequential difference in our world in many ways.
And if you look at the saints, there's so many great examples of them saying yes to God. Many of them, if you would look at them, let's say in the from a current perspective, you'd say, well, how could they do that? They're so young, they're so inexperienced. But the two saints we're going to talk about in the first part of this section of The Power of One is a perfect example of exactly what we're discussing.
Right. Well, and we've been highlighting a saint on every episode, but this time, Power of One was so powerful, we selected two. So our first one, of course, is Saint Bernadette, and her feast day is April the 16th. She was born in Lourdes, France on January 7th, 1844. At the age of 14, near a cave, she witnessed the first of 18 apparitions of the Virgin Mary, who identified herself as the Immaculate Conception. At 22, Bernadette chose to withdraw to the convent and mother house of the Sisters of Charity of Nevers. She stayed there until her death in 1879. She was canonized on December the 8th, 1933, and usually depicted in the dress of a shepherd or a nun. Her name is of German origin and means brave as a bear. And of course, recently, Teresa, you got to
That's right.
to go
My
to
husband
Lourdes.
Dominic, who's also a deacon, is a knight, invested as a knight in the Order of Malta. And each year, the Order of Malta from around the world, they have a convention that they gather in Lourdes. And what they do, actually, it's all about serving the sick, or the malades, as which is a French word for sick. And what was amazing to me about visiting Lourdes, well, the basilica is beautiful, the grounds are beautiful, the grotto is beautiful. But what I kept thinking about was just what we were discussing a minute ago, the power of one. Here's a young girl. She was a child, basically, and she was a sickly child, and she really, her family referred to her as illiterate and even called her stupid. Her teachers referred to her as being, you know, not the brightest one, you know, in the bunch. And yet she was so strong when she saw Our Lady. At first she didn't know who she was, and then eventually she identifies herself as the Immaculate Conception, which was right after, actually, the dogma of the Immaculate Conception that had been confirmed. But how would this little country girl at the foothill of the Pyrenees know anything about this theological teaching called the Immaculate Conception? But she knew that she saw Our Lady, and she kept talking and talking and talking. And one of our homework assignments is going to be this book that was written by Franz Werfel, The Song of Bernadette, which the movie was based on. They should also watch the movie. We should put that in our homework assignment. But she's amazing. Absolutely
and of course,
amazing.
our second saint, again, a woman from France. It was Joan of Arc. And she was born in France in 1412. And she also was illiterate. She was an illiterate peasant. And at the age of 13, she heard the voices of saints calling on her to free France. At the time, was involved in a 100 Years' War with England. She thus went into battle against the army of the English. Later on, she was declared a heretic and a betrayer, but then the Holy Father overturned that verdict. But she died though during that time when she was betrayed.
Burned at the stake.
Burned at the stake.
Yeah.
Burned at the stake. You know, and then she finally was canonized all the way in 1920. Imagine how many hundreds of years went by before her canonization. She's depicted in armor, bearing her standard in her armor in battle. She's a protector of telegraph and radio operators.
That's
so
interesting.
radio,
I wonder
radio for
why.
you. I don't know,
You know,
but you do some radio, Teresa.
Yeah,
so,
just a
you know,
little, yeah.
a little. And she's also the patron of France, and her name has an origin in Hebrew, which means Yahweh is gracious. So again, you know, a young woman, just like these two ladies were illiterate. It says poor backgrounds, right?
Basically from the middle of nowhere.
Middle of
Yeah.
nowhere, both of them, and look what they accomplished and look what they did. So, you know, for women watching out there and say, oh, well, you know, I don't have a theology degree, like you said in the opening.
Yes.
Pray to these two saints to
Yes.
give you the courage to do what gives God is calling you to do.
And I think about them, the bottom line is the power of one. All it takes is one person, but
That's
it's really
right.
the power of your yes. Just like you mentioned the
Yes.
Blessed Mother.
Right.
It's the power of that yes to
Yes.
God, and then God working through you. And we're going to go to our clip right now because the shows go by so fast.
I
There's so
know.
much to talk about. But this is a good example of a young woman that we mentioned at a previous show who is originally from Nigeria, now living in Great Britain. Her name is Uju. We caught up with her in Rome, and she's very involved in the pro-life movement, standing up against the push for contraception in her native land of Nigeria and across the African continent. And she said, no, I have to do something. She wrote a letter. I read it on the air. It went viral. She now is involved in her own ministry for pro-life movement. And we're going to talk to her, and we did talk to her actually in Rome, about really what it means when you say yes to God.
Well, I had seen the interview that she had on CNN, and it shocked me because of the boldness of the untruth she was presenting about Africa. So I had to write it. All I could think about were all my sisters and aunties and, you know, friends in Nigeria who she was supposedly presenting and representing, and I had to respond. I had to say no. She had said that that she met women in Nairobi in Kenya who wanted contraceptives, but that didn't sound like the African woman. You know, that I grew up in Africa all those years, and I just started writing to say no, don't do this. But at first it started off as reasons. Just, it wasn't supposed to be an article. It wasn't supposed to be an open letter. All I wanted to do was just to write the kind of effect her contraception was going to bring to my people, and just some of the things that were diametrically opposed to our cultural heritage as Africans. So I had to write it, and it started as with a few lines, and then it grew and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I just kept writing. 5 hours down the line, it had become an open letter, and I didn't know what to do with it. I thought, well, if I send this to Gates Foundation, surely they'll throw it out through the window. I will send it to someone who will care to at least read it. And then I went to your website, and I sent it to the email address that was there, and you took it out and launched it boldly to the world. So all I wanted, as I said, was just to show it to somebody. And the day I sent it honestly to you, all I thought you were going to do with it was to have the points and to have the facts that really Africans are not asking and scrambling and scraping for contraception. That was all. And then you read it, and one thing led to another, and you know, the rest it just became a domino effect. That I would say God started off with you, and now it's gone so far, it's gone beyond me, and it's all the better because now I know really has nothing much to do with me. All I just did was to write the letter. Well, with what has happened to me, surely anybody, you know, God can use anybody. All it takes is the fiat to say yes. yes to God, yes to the promptings of the Holy Spirit. I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I had just prayed the Rosary, 5 decades of the Rosary, and that led me to this point where I had to write the letter. And so it was as if the words didn't even come from me. So anybody, God can choose to use anybody, but I think our job is to stand firm and say, yes, Lord, I will do whatever you want me to do, however you want me to do it, as long as you want it, in the way you want it, just because you want it. So that is the story of me and the open letter. I've just come back from Nigeria, where we had a massive conference for life, which is really a first of its kind, at least in this part of Nigeria. And while I was there, a lot of people were asking, we need to do this more often. We need to do this more often. So I'm hoping that if God has chosen to use me in this way, maybe I will have to face Africa a bit more closely to serve the gospel of life among my people, and bring the gospel of life and the message of life to my people, especially in this age and time when it's obvious that on the international stage, there are definitely people who are real proponents of the culture of death, specifically directed towards Africans. So I'm hoping that God will use my little life.
And you know, ladies, in Uju's case, she was, you know, just working and going to church. She was a good Catholic, loved her faith, but she wanted to do more. And she was so upset about this. She said, I have to do something. And she and I keep in touch. We've become email friends. And she says to me, I can't believe everything that God has been doing. But the bottom line is, it's not about her. It wasn't about St. Bernadette. It wasn't about St. Joan of Arc.
Right.
The Blessed Mother. It wasn't about
Yes.
her. It was about Christ. It was about always the
Right.
fiat, always being giving yourself to God.
Exactly, and in this youth and a person who is too young or feels that they're ignorant, don't know too much, I think that God uses those people to confound the world, to basically make a statement. And then somebody like Uju, so docile, instead of being discouraged by the fact that, oh my goodness, contraception is being bombarded in my country, and saying, well, what can I do? It's too much of a problem. These groups have so much money and political power. And she said, no, I have to speak up. And now with social media and your radio program and everything, this got out. So maybe more people will get involved with fighting what's going on in Africa and also Latin America. Planned Parenthood Federation is international.
Right.
And they're pushing contraception like
All
it's the
over.
best
All over the
thing.
world.
Right.
When people, what they need is health care. What they need is to learn methods like natural family planning.
Right, and
that
they
are-
need better infrastructures. For example, in
Exactly.
Nigeria, what the interesting thing, remember when in our show on vocation, where Father Frank, our spiritual director, said, God gives you the desire, the ability, and the opportunity.
That's right.
She had the desire to help and to address this problem, but she also had the ability. She has a medical background. So she was able to use that medical background and
To get
explain
people
the
to
conditions
listen.
in her country
That's
and say
right.
the families don't need contraception.
Contraception.
Not only do they need to understand the faith, as we all do, but they need the infrastructure medically to help them with other issues in
That's
terms
right.
of prenatal care,
Yes.
postnatal care, other things like that. So this is someone like St. Bernadette and like St. Joan of Arc who said, I can do something, but taking the step toward God and allowing God to use that power of one with the power coming
Yes.
from Him. We have to take a break, so when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more, and we'll have another clip from someone else who said yes, and God has her now running a March for Life in Rome. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Catholic View for Women. Thanks so much for joining us. Teresa Tomeo, along, of course, with Astrid Bennett Gutierrez and Janet Murata, talking about the power of one. You can make a difference. One person saying yes to God, and God taking that yes and doing amazing things, because it's all about Him. And we talked about St. Joan of Arc, St. Bernadette. You heard a clip and saw a clip actually from our friend Uju. And now we want to go to another interview that Janet and I actually conducted in Rome with Virginia Cota. Now, I met Virginia originally back in January at the March for Life. She came to the march, which of course in Washington is international, to tell us about what she's doing in Rome and how the Rome March for Life began. So we're going to listen to what Virginia has to say about the importance of saying yes to God and letting God do the rest.
We thought to go on year after year, increasing of course a little bit the participants to the march, but never with such a great amount of people participating. And especially I think that it was the enthusiasm that the people presented participating to the march, and this was, I think, the best success of the march. In Italy, something was missing. What I saw in other countries, and especially in US, that we never had Catholics, of course, because Italy is a Catholic country, but also people involved in the public square in defense of life. And so I thought really that that Italy was missing something, and so that we needed to do an effort in organizing a movement, a public movement in the public square. Well, in fact, we started in defending family, so in family issues, and but of course family and life are very linked, and so of course we always followed the family issues and pro-life issues, and participating to the different marches in the different countries. We thought that it was time to defend also life in the public square, because we do it for family, and especially now that we have the problems of homosexual wedding and homosexual adoptions. So we thought that this is also an important issue, of course, to follow, and so the family and life are very much linked together. When the date of the march approaches, and I feel sometimes to be a little bit tired. I think, well, this perhaps won't last long, so it will be for perhaps another year, but not too much. But then, of course, the results and also what the people, how they react and how much they need that. I really feel that I cannot do a step backward, and so that we have to go on, and especially and especially for myself, because I think that the defense of life today is really at the core of the defense of Christian civilization. Well, the faith in God, and prayer, especially, because I think that without prayer we cannot achieve anything. So every morning when I go to mass or when I start the prayers, I always think that this is really the thing that makes me doing something. So and of course the love for God, and I think that today we have to defend the rights of God in our society, and this, I think, is the most important thing to do today, because in our societies relativism has pushed God away. So people don't believe in God any longer, and the younger people, so the youngest, have lost a lot. So I think that what we have to do as Catholics, what we have to do is to concentrate in the defense of the rights of God in our society. I think that this is what exactly God asks us, is to accomplish in our little own world, because we cannot do everything. And even the march, when I think what we have achieved with the march, it's nothing compared to all what is happening in the world. So I think that what God asks us is only to accomplish our own duty every day in the little things, and then if He wants, He can change the world in a minute.
I love testimonies like this. I really
Absolutely.
do.
And when you think of Marches for Life, of course, the original March for Life that started all these international ones was really in the United States with Nellie Gray, who we lost recently. But she was just one woman, a lawyer, legal background, and said, abortion is legal, we have to stand up and do something. She started, one woman, the March for Life. And then when you think about how do we get the West Coast Walk for Life, again, 2 women came to Washington and said, we want to take this now to the West Coast.
And we
you know,
need it over there. Yeah.
yeah, and you know over in California you need it. But they didn't have a big committee or anything or anyone helping them. They just, two women said, we can do this. We want to bring it to San Francisco even, of all places. And they did it. You know, and now Virginia in Rome. I mean, when you think about the Roman population there, I mean, it's supposedly everything is being such a Catholic country, but you've
No,
been
it's
there.
very
You see
secularized.
very few
Right.
baby carriages, even when
And
you're
most of
walking
the people
around.
that are in the churches, as you both know,
Are the tourists.
Are the tourists,
The
and
tourists.
pilgrims. Now, there's a little bit of a resurgence that's happening, thanks be to God, but it's been very secularized, and that's what
Right.
Benedict XVI, when he was still our Holy Father, talked a lot about in terms of really, and that's really where this whole re-evangelization or the new evangelization came from.
Right.
right.
And I'm so inspired by this particular topic because in reading about Bernadette and St. Joan of Arc, I can't help but to think of our young women like a Lila Rose, who are basically like a David and Goliath situation where
That's
God
right.
is calling them, they have a conversion, they're following the Lord, and now they're taking on just huge monsters. I mean, taking on Planned Parenthood
That's right.
and leading others to do the same and not being afraid, you know, I'm only 15, I'm only in college, and doing so much to influence the culture. So I think everybody, if we're open our hearts to God, we'll see needs in the world. In particular, I mean, the pro-life movement is it's a clear one when all of us can make a difference and not be afraid. God will equip us, and He is calling us.
Well, I think the way God opens the doors too, because once you say yes, He wants to see that you trust Him enough
That's
to
right.
take you where He wants you to go. In Uju's case, it started with her writing this letter, and then she ended up doing a website, and she ended up actually contacting her. The bishops from Nigeria, from her hometown in Nigeria, actually contacted her. They embraced her letter to use it as in their materials to educate the public and to educate people coming to their country who want to bring contraception there. They had their first pro-life conference, a big one in Nigeria, in which Uju was involved. And she's also with a group now called Catholic Voices in Great Britain, which is a group of on fire Catholics witnessing about the faith. And she also told me she had an opportunity to do some interviews on radio and TV in Great Britain. So you just never know. But again, you have to have confidence in God, love God, and trust Him enough to know that I heard this, what's the saying? God is if He brings you to it, He's going to see it through it.
Absolutely.
Well, and notice these women, none of them belonged originally to an organization.
Right.
They didn't get a committee or a board together. They they didn't think about, I got to raise this money.
Right. Yes.
They just had a concept, an idea that I have to attack this problem. This is what I have to do, and they just went
And
and
they
did
didn't
it.
wait for their priest, not that you shouldn't seek spiritual direction or advice, but they didn't
Absolutely.
wait for somebody
They
to
didn't
say,
wait for permission
You
from
have to
somebody.
have permission.
They
You
saw
know.
a need. They saw that, for example, like in the case of Lila Rose, she saw her generation being
Right.
affected by abortion, being
There's
basically-
another great example,
Yeah,
Lila
that's
Rose.
right.
yes,
Lila
in the
Rose,
yeah.
university campuses, what better place? And saying, no, I can take this on. I can bring others to also do this, and hopefully more young people will join her
And
example.
when she first went into, like, say, Planned Parenthood, exposed to undercover work, she didn't have live action. Her ministry now, Live Action, was born out of her
own
initial
action.
almost guts to go into those abortion clinics and show what was really going on and what was happening and how the women were being lied to.
And-
But she didn't have the committee. She did the
Yes.
action first, and then now she has many other girls helping her. But that came later. She had the courage to go forward with what she felt God was telling her to do.
Yeah, and I think it's such an encouragement, and that's why we wanted to feature these two ladies.